And perfect. All right. And so let's see if anybody is waiting to come in. Going live. All right. Perfect. We've got some folks joining us now. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And as you folks join, feel free to, at any point in the talk, ask a question in the chat. And then if you're not comfortable, you can send it to me directly and I can read them out loud for you. But welcome to episode 9 of Diggin In. I'm Alice Prisco. I'm hosting today's talk. It's a series of live presentations with scholars from around the country, and it's co-sponsored by the RS Peabody Institute of Archaeology and the Massachusetts Archaeological Society, which is where I come to you from. So we're going to begin with a little bit of a land acknowledgement for the land that the Peabody Institute and its school, Phillips Academy, are on. Phillips Academy occupies the land of the Pennacook and the Pawtucket people and the lands of the contemporary Abenaki, Massachusetts, Wampanoag, Wampanoag, Pocketuck, and Nipmuc nations. So we honor all the indigenous people who are here now, who have been here for time immemorial, and who will continue to be here in the future. We acknowledge the indigenous genocide and the continued oppression of the Native people, their voices, cultures, and spiritualities. We understand how education has been used by settler institutions and the attempted erasure of indigenous people. And so we commit to interrogating the histories and our complicity in colonization, centering on Native voices and communities. And we just want to dismantle the ongoing legacy of settler colonization at Phillips Academy and beyond. So that's just something that we really are passionate about. And we'd invite you to join us every other Wednesday. I believe we have one Diggin' In after this at 1:30 through December for our presentations. You can visit us at peabody.andover.edu or the Massachusetts Archaeological Facebook page to get a schedule of date and presenters. And if you wanted to expand your impact, you could become a member of the Massachusetts Archaeological Society. That's through me. I do membership. And we are able to bring you some great programming. We just are so thankful for people who tune in like you. So today we are so excited to welcome Tara Tetrault and Suzanne Johnson. Tara has managed the Basil and Nancy Dorsey Archaeology Project for the Sugarland Ethnohistory Museum in Poolesville, Maryland. And she has over 20 years of experience in archaeology, curation, college teaching, artifact studies, and integrating archaeology into K-12 education, which is so important. And she heavily focuses on that K-12 education through her participation in the Smithsonian Institute, the Global Humanities Institute, the UN Sustainable Development Teaching Fellowship, and the Scholarship for Excellence in Teaching. She also created the Maynard Burgess House Archaeology Curriculum Module, used to redesign the MC Summer Public Archaeology Program for children, and ran summer teaching programs. She now uses this expertise to train K-12 teachers at conferences on how to integrate archaeology into their teaching, which, as someone who works at an archaeology museum, I can tell you the kids need, because they think that we have dinosaurs. Suzanne Johnson is a retired kindergarten teacher, and she's currently the president of the Sugarland Ethnohistory Project. She began her work shortly after retirement under Gwendora Reese, who created the project in 1995. So Gwen and Suzanne published one of the few post-emancipation African-American history books with historian Jeff Sipek in 2020. And they recruited Tara to begin excavating at the site in 2021. With Gwen's passing in 2021, Suzanne recruited new board members and formed committees to raise awareness, to renovate the museum's roof, purchase a storage room, and begin planning and fundraising to create a new Sugarland museum. So again, if you have any questions, you can submit them straight to me, or at the end, we'll have time if you feel comfortable asking out loud. So welcome, Suzanne and Tara. Thank you for joining us today. And I'll let you ladies take it away.
Okay, thank you so much, Alice. Again, my name is Suzanne Johnson. I'm serving now as the president of the Sugarland Ethnohistory Project. This is a passion for me for two ways. One, I love history, and the other, I love genealogy. And both of those passions are taken up with this project. Gwen, my cousin, started the project, like Alice mentioned, in 1995. She grew up in what we call Sugarland, which is now part of Poolesville, Maryland, Upper Western Montgomery County, Maryland. It was a small town developed by former enslaved people. They bought the land for the community from former white landowners. The property that the church that you presently see now is on was purchased for $25 in 1871. The first church that was in Sugarland, which was the center of the community, was burned, and the present church that's standing now was built in 1893. The community was a true community. There were a few families who bought land in the surrounding area. The church was the center, as I mentioned before. The community also had its own school, store, and post office, and a rehearsal hall, because the community had a cornet band. The community grew and thrived together because the families helped each other. They helped with building their houses, harvesting food, butchering animals, and just generally supporting each other. The community also had a well, and if you will probably be able to see a picture of that well on the cover of our book that was mentioned. And they all used that particular well until they dug their own. The project, like I said, was spearheaded by my cousin Gwen, who passed about 1.5 years ago, and we're really still missing her. The name came out of a cooperation with Howard University back in 2005. And we were incorporated then as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Our goal is to preserve the history of the community of Sugarland. And it got its name. There's a legend and the truth. The legend is that the town was named Sugarland because the women there were so sweet. But the truth is, it's named after the beautiful sugar maple trees that surround the area. The church presently is not used as a church for regular services, but is used as a museum to house all of the artifacts and documents that my cousin Gwen initially preserved and created. We have quite a few things that people who are from the community or have ancestors in the community will be able to come back and research their families. The church and the cemetery take up about 2.5 acres of land. The cemetery has been documented. We have, it's also been mapped. And that particular piece of land we found so far has over 348 people there. Anyone who is a descendant of the community will still be able to be buried there if they can show their direct descendants of the community. Let's see. We do have, like I said, the building that right now that the church is on, the church is serving as a museum. Our plans are to build a separate building, to replace a building that we had that is everyone called the community hall. And that's where we plan to build a museum to house all our artifacts, because our dream is also to keep the church as it was back in 1893. We have done quite a few things. Gwen will be proud of us. Since she passed, we have a new roof on the church, and as it was being done, we found out that roof evidently was put on in 1893. No other roof had been put on there. We also are working on some renovations for the windows, and like I said, the building's almost 130 years old, so the windows need replacing. The original pews are still there that we would like to refurbish. The floors we would like to refurbish. And we will just want to make it look like it did back in 1893. The history part, the genealogy part that I mentioned before, I have family roots there. My mother's branch of the family grew up there. My grandfather's property is still down the road from the church. And as a child, remembering walking up to the church and for different services. So that's still very, very present in my memory. So Alice mentioned that I was a kindergarten teacher, and I tried very hard to slow down talking because kindergarten teachers usually tend to talk a little fast. So that's kind of the general background. Tara came to us 2 years ago now to start the archaeology for the Basil and Nancy Dorsey property, which is the 2 acres directly adjacent to the church. That particular piece of property was given to us by one of the community members because they wanted to help preserve what parts of Sugarland that we could preserve. So they gave us that property. This past May, there were 2 more acres of property adjacent to that property that was also deeded to the ethnohistory project. So we're really proud that we have at least 6+ original acres of the Sugarland community that was developed back in 1871. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have, probably at the end, and I'll let Tara tell you all the exciting things that she's found in the last 2 years. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. I'm gonna, not sure how to fix this. I'm trying to, my computer won't progress, I can't make the slides go forward. So I'm thinking, I can stop share for a minute. Maybe that would just do it.
I think if you try to stop and start, that might help.
Stop. Okay. I don't know why it does this. I've done this in my classroom too.
It came right up when you.
Yeah, it did. I might just leave it like this if that's okay. You can see the slides on the side, but
That's absolutely fine. That's fine.
okay. Okay. So I apologize for that. We have, come on, you. Yeah, when I talk to it, so you can see the building that Suzanne was talking about, and the brief history of the Basil and Nancy, of their life there on the farm. Suzanne and I and Jeff Sipek have been working on over time, and I sort of broke it down into 3 sections of time. 1874, when Basil and we believe Nancy first bought the property, and when Basil and Nancy built their house. So, and then when they raised their children, and given their children's ages, I capped that at 1885, and then really, you see the oldest one get married in a little earlier, of course. So we have sort of 3 different time periods: 1887, 74 to 85, and the 1880s, and then 1901 to 1909, and when Basil and Nancy are getting on in years. Some of the interesting things I put under 1881 to 1900, you see that Mary, who was Basil and Nancy's middle daughter, Mary, married the postman, Nathan Johnson. And they lived near, just on the other side of the property. And Horace Jackson married their oldest daughter, Eliza, and had children. And they also lived right next door to the post office. So it's a pretty tight-knit community. Okay. But as Suzanne had mentioned, they brought me onto the site and said, we found these 4 cornerstones, Tara. We want you to see if we believe this to be Basil and Nancy Dorsey's house, but we'd like you to test it and find out. And so that was really exciting to me to be, asked to come and join them. And then also I had done quite a bit on early African-American communities. So to have this opportunity to excavate a real farm was just thrilling to me. One of the things that wasn't available on the site were a lot of features, fireplaces, wood, glass windows, any raw material for building. But one of the things that was really neat that was available to me was an interview from their neighbor, Tillman Lee, and he described the inside of the house. And this was just a wonderful thing to have when you had so few artifacts to pull from. And he mentions how, I put this in red, that there was a chimney that or stove flue that ran down. It was basically a single pipe that came down from the ceiling to this wood stove that they've had planked in the middle of their house. So going with that, when I first measured the house size, it was about 14 feet by 10 feet. And so I'm looking at this rectangle, and on one side, if you can imagine, is the well and a lot of woods. And then on the other side is some woods, and you can see the church. So I'm thinking public face, private face, of the house. So I divided it down the middle and thought, okay, let's assume then that the kitchen is on the public face and maybe the addition's on the back. And that we were incredibly lucky with a lot of it, but that seemed to hold true. So on the kitchen side of the house, we excavated, first I put in 5 typical test units, 1 in each corner and 1 in the center. But the one in the center didn't yield that much until I looked at Tillman Lee's interview and started thinking about what was he talking about? Where was the kitchen? And lo and behold, we excavated test units 11 and 18 and uncovered all sorts of food consumption and serving, medicinal bottles, food storage, and then a couple of, things that make their way into the kitchen like you and I do today. We come home, we bring our stuff home, we put it on the kitchen table. So sometimes we find an agricultural tool or two. But, so I put pictures of some of the artifacts. You can see the ironstone plate, or it's probably a little bowl, a very, not a very deep bowl. That's that off-white piece. There was a beautiful stoneware jug with a metallic glaze, and I put the handle in that picture, and some wonderful examples of American salt glaze stoneware, really big. This one's a jug, but there were jars and all sorts of storage, food storage, or water, something you'd put outside to catch water. And then the other things that I thought were really fascinating, not really up on the, the most beautiful, but they were fascinating because it tells you so much. And those were in the lower slide, the agricultural tool that you may have just brought in because it broke, or for some other purpose. The items on the bottom, to the long iron tools that I believe they used to stoke fire or to pull a, the rack of an oven out, or push it back in. They had little edges, rough edges on them. And then the other thing, that the piece of metal, they were actually like in a hoop shape, but they're clasps. And when I saw them, I was like, oh, wow, I had these growing up. And my mom had bought sight unseen this old farmhouse when I was a really young kid. And when we went to the kitchen, that's how they covered the cabinets, were with these, small pieces of metal. And so I put a picture in to sort of imagine what it could have looked like in the Dorsey's house too. And then we found a lot of ginger beer bottles, but interestingly enough, they were ginger beer bottles. And then there's a big history about ginger beer bottles and how they evolve, I think, into something more like ginger ale, because they talk that over time they took a lot of the alcohol out. And over time, they also go from a tan and cream color to a black and gray color. I thought it was fascinating. I didn't really, this was stuff I sort of learned as I was doing the excavation. But one of the things I noticed in excavating the kitchen side in particular were that when you came down to the bottom of the excavation unit, mind you, that this was a building that had the wood building with a wood floor, and that all the houses in Sugarland had a wood floor, but they were built on stones. So I believe you put underneath that part, straight on the surface, were these huge slabs of local stone. And I think the reason you put that down is to sort of basically encourage water to go away from the house. But I believe that's correct. And down at that level, when we excavated the stone, we found the small Native American 1-cent piece that you see here. And interestingly enough, it dates from 1859 to 1909, but the Dorseys were there from 1874 and then passed away beginning in 1907 and 1909. So I thought that was sort of interesting. Let me show you the rest of the house. Yes, okay. So on the other side of the house, we had, oh, and one last thing with the kitchen, we found 2 prohibition bottles, which start to question, okay, so if Nancy and Basil passed away by 1907 and 1909, and you're finding prohibition bottles, somebody's there. So we're starting to look more at their son, John, or maybe their daughter, Elizabeth. Elizabeth's the only one we haven't been able to figure out where she left, who she married, or if she married, or if she left the community. So those are the 2 that I'm pondering and will be spending some time researching this fall. So on the other side of the house, though, we had put in 2 test units in the corners on the that would be the west side or the well side, and found one area that had a lot of I sort of liken it to socializing and entertainment. I mean, they had the kaolin pipe bowl, that long white clay pipe bowl, which they made really long pipes. I'm sure you guys know this by 1850. And so that was one piece that we found. We've also found a marble. So, there were a few artifacts that were saying entertainment, socializing, maybe relax area. The bracelet was kind of neat, so I put that in there. But on the opposite corner, we found some work-related, housework-related type of items, but then personal items like the belt buckle, we found a bunch of buttons, but they were white workman buttons of different sizes. So maybe child and adult, which makes sense. You had at least 1 or 2 families living in the house in the very beginning. What else am I missing? Oh, well, there's another piece of the metallic glaze. Oh, and the brass button. So we were out there excavating, and I remember Jeff was excavating the above test unit with the kaolin pipe, and we found this brass button, but it didn't have any, it's plain, like you can see, it's just undecorated. There's no military insignia. And he brought up the idea that perhaps it was all part of the uniform for the Sugarland, the local band. And then doing some research on Eliza, the oldest daughter, and how she married Horace Jackson, one of the local farmers. It says that, well, Horace Jackson was one of the organizers of the local band. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So let me move on to the back door. So once we finished the interior, we moved outside, and one of our archaeologists, Ron Nunn, had excavated the back door and came down on a much deeper test unit than we had found artifacts for before. But also there was a midden area, and in and around the test unit, he found a gutta percha button, one of those, it's a black plastic button, but it was dated to 1843. That would be the plain one. There was a really damaged one that I put in the picture, just to say that there were a variety of gutta percha buttons, and also a variety of workman buttons. But the really neat little artifact on the top left is a broken, what we believe to be a kid's china cup. And it was the first evidence we've seen of children's toys. So, I mean, realize too, the site was pretty picked over when we got there, and the family would have moved. And then imagine too that probably people, when you move off your property, material gets reused. So that could be the reason for not finding things like the wood boards on the walls, or the hardware, I suppose. But it was really the only toy we found. So we thought that was really exciting. And the piece of onyx necklace setting that you see in front of you was the other really exciting thing that Jeff uncovered in this test unit. It was in the bottom of the sea, and I guess to me, one of the interesting things, I'm ready for, hey, a necklace, right? Except that there's no hole, there's no perforation, there's no evidence of even a stone being set in the little, on the setting there. I would have expected to see some sort of discoloration, or even evidence of the stone or glue that was used, but nothing. And then there was no hole for the attachment. Now, some people have said to me, well, couldn't you have wrapped string around it? And I suppose, but when I took it around to some of the experts in the area, they said, Tara, that's, you've got a piece of hoodoo. And I thought to myself, well, yeah, I guess I do. It's not where I would have gone first. I guess I just hadn't, you look at it and you say, well, it could be, but I don't know. And so realize too that in some African-American communities, Black onyx is used to protect and to ensure safety for the future. So like it's, like other pieces of hoodoo, it is there to ensure strength into the future. And, I had to think about that for a while, but I was thinking that if I were new to freedom and it was 1874 and I had just gotten my first piece of land to build my first house, that I might want that security too, of just having a little extra protection. So the fact that they invested in land, I think, is really important, that they were trying to steer their family away to having, a better life. I think these are the things that are really important when you see a piece like this. And that is a common thread that I read about when I read Gwen and Suzanne and Jeff's book, is that they spoke a lot about how, even though these things had happened in the past, we are steering our children to see the positive things that are going to happen in the future. So with that, I'm going to show you the last area we excavated. This was the addition. And, I was saying, I thought the addition would be on the well side, and the well is actually up, if you can see that tree in the distant at the top of the slide. But it's back up there. And so anyways, we put in several test units because we were finding quite a few stone features. And throughout those test units, we found a lot of animal bone, butchered animal bone, forks and knives and spoons of various types, and then buttons and, a thimble and things like that. So there was definitely a personal space and a commonly used area, whether it was used to help clean at some point or sew during one part of the day and make dinner for another part of the day. But it was definitely used for, to help us do other things we need to do around the house. And I guess I can't emphasize enough that by building that home, that, the Dorseys are really emphasizing that they had hope for their future and that this was a message they wanted to pass on to their children. And, that they would also do whatever they needed to do to make sure their children were successful. And I guess my last point is that, or one of my last points is that by excavating the Dorsey site, we learned that there were a lot of things that defy modern stereotypes, like the fact that Jeff was able to pull up a deed that was written only to Nancy Dorsey, and that once they made their final payment, they created a new deed that said Basil and Nancy Dorsey. But that was the best. I mean, I thought that was super. I had been teaching women's studies for a while, and I've been teaching about how land ownership was supposed to be awarded to women in the 1830s and 40s, but throughout the United States, it was very difficult to actually realize. So seeing the deed in her name was just super. And we hope that by publishing some of these stories in the Sugarland book I have started for Canaan, and in the archaeology teaching module for the Dorsey site, that we're able to encourage new teachers, or a new generation rather, to learn about some of the successes that early African-American communities have had. And we hope that therefore the new generation will gain a new perspective of what African-American people have achieved over the generations. And I'm happy to take any questions you have about the site.
Thank you, ladies, so much. We did get a question in the chat and you sort of just answered it, but I'll ask it anyway. You had said the question was, what was the most unexpected thing to be found? So was it the deed with Nancy's name on it, or was there something else that kind of really took you by surprise?
Wow. Well, the deed and the coin and that piece of black onyx really surprised me. I mean, I had read a lot about what other archaeologists had found in terms of caches, and I thought, nah, it's not going to happen. And the coin was really cool. You always hear about that. I think it's one of number one questions people ask archaeologists. Have you found any coins? And I haven't.
That's true, yeah. And then I guess you can both answer this one. Tara, if you'd like to answer it first, what's kind of your favorite thing that you found? Maybe not unexpected, maybe something that you had an inkling you'd find, but what really completes the history of the area, and what's your favorite thing that you've found so far?
Wow. Wow, well, I'm not sure. I maybe the child's teacup. That was really neat to me. I had done a paper a long time ago in the 90s about reevaluating some Native American artifacts at a site just below DC. And I suggested that these little objects could have been children's objects. And people, I don't think we were talking about children's objects back then, but there's been a lot in the literature in the past 5 or 10 years. So maybe the teacup.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Suzanne, do you have a favorite artifact that's been found or something that you were really excited that they unearthed?
So Suzanne, do you want to turn your microphone?
I got it. I forgot I had muted. Probably the buttons on the kids' clothes, because I remember my grandmother also took in laundry, and talking to Tara, we were thinking maybe that's where some of those might have come from. But just the buckles on the clothing and the coin, I think the fact that, and we did another presentation and someone mentioned it might have been a freedom coin. So that was really special.
Yeah, that I have to agree with you there. That would be, that's a really cool idea, you know.
Yeah.
Reasonable, you know, because
Oh.
if they did, then they buried it under the house.
To make sure it was safe, yeah.
Lost it under the house.
We did get someone who raised their hand, Mike Lucas. So I'm going to go ahead and turn your microphone on, Mike, if you've got a question.
Like New York, Mike Lucas?
I'm not sure.
Hello. Hello, I am Mike Lucas. No, not from New York. From
Oh, okay.
Lakewood, Ohio, actually. I am a professional archaeologist by trade, currently a provisional student at Johns Hopkins University in a master's program. Yeah, thanks for talking. I heard y'all talk at a New Jersey archaeology lecture, I believe, when you had just uncovered the black cameo and coin. I believe that y'all said that the coin, you hadn't much details about it yet. You gave a little bit more details about it here because I guess you had more time to lab work with it and stuff like that. But I believe it was, y'all told me it was found in context with the black orb a little bit because it was like found within the doorway of the house, and the black orb, the cameo, was in the center of the house. And, you know, like that is a common place for, like, you know, where coins would get dropped by the porchway. But then, you know, I also said that, like, down in Louisiana and New Orleans, like coins could be freedom tokens and stuff like that as well. And just like the context of it being in the doorway, I believe, was just like, you know, it could be in conjunction with the black cameo. Also, next thing is the child's Chinaware cup is a really interesting, because Chinaware has always been an indicator of status. There's even like a whole series of pseudo Chinaware by all the different colonial powers that occupied so-called United States. But just the fact that it's like, you know, within a kid's playset is like they're kind of like, you know, like sending a social message, a social like learning message through that child's playtime, that like it's okay to hold yourself to a higher standard and stuff like that. And I think that's just like really beautiful as freed people of color and stuff like that. And yeah, don't want to info dump too much longer. I'll leave y'all with my email, because I really would like to collaborate with y'all in the future. I visited the church and cemetery once and have read your book. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. Does anybody else have any questions for Suzanne and Tara? Or you can raise your hand or in the chat, you can send a message. They did a great job kind of answering all of my questions before I asked them. So I'm sure that happened for the rest of you as well. All right, well, ladies, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and teaching us about this. This is so important. I think it's great, you know, that you were able, Suzanne, that you have such a personal connection to this project. I think that's really beautiful, and that you're honoring the legacy of your cousin, and Tara, that you're able to come in and give a lot of context to things that we wouldn't know about. And, you know, freedmen history is often ignored and not spoken of, and so giving it a voice is so important, and I'm so thankful to both of you for that. I do appreciate it so much. If anybody would like to send me an email as a way to get in touch with Tara or Suzanne, you can just send it to my first and last name, which is Alice Prisco. It should be there in the little chat box at Gmail. And then I wanted to thank you all for joining us today. If you are interested, we do have one more talk of our Diggin' In series, Wednesday, December 9th, and we're going to be joined by Jessica Bowes, who will be speaking about preservation at the Harriet Tubman National History Park. So a little bit of continuation on the theme, but on a larger scale. This one was nice because it was so personal. So again, we wanted to thank everybody, thank our speakers, and thank the viewers, and welcome you to check out our website at Mass Archaeological Society and consider becoming members. We hope to see you soon.
All right. Thanks again for having us.
Thank you very much, guys. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Enjoy, ladies.
All righty.